Tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou katoa. I'd firstly like to acknowledge the land we're on. We're on the iwi of Tamaki Makaurau in the city of Auckland, New Zealand. I'd like to welcome you to this year's online Vernon User Group meeting. Today we'll be going through a recap of where we're at with Vernon CMS. The next major version of Vernon that we're working on is codenamed Fantastic Fantail. So each of the major versions we've named after a New Zealand animal, and we're planning to release that at the beginning of next year. Much of the development work on that is already complete, and I'll give you a quick overview of some of the key changes that we've made. We're increasingly seeing Vernon CMS getting used for more specialised collections, including libraries and archives. So we're getting more requests from those collection types to add additional fields. For library collections, we've added new fields covering call number and series titles. And so those are fields where you can now add authority-controlled entries to group together that material better. Most of our users have got the core catalogue of their collection complete and are now on to a new phase of extending the information and doing ongoing cleanup of that data. As part of that cleanup, it's sometimes necessary to delete data that was perhaps put in incorrectly, or data where you want to remove it and replace it with a better version that you're able to import from somewhere else. And so to facilitate that, we've extended the bulk update window to allow bulk deletes. That's controlled with the selection box at the top right to choose whether you're doing an update or delete, and that's controlled by security. So there might be some people that are allowed to do bulk updates and some that are only allowed to do updates but not deletes. This tool will allow you to bulk clear all of the data in a specific field or selectively delete particular rows in any of the tables of a record. So in this example, I'm bulk deleting all of the other ID entries, but only where the other ID type matches the catalogue raisonné number. We've also extended the valuation facilities. We're seeing more cases where people are having to match up the valuations in Vernon with a separate asset management system, or need to more accurately record that information down to cent level. So throughout the entire system, we've extended valuations to support cents, and then we've also added in support for foreign valuations. So there's a new foreign valuation column, plus the conversion as at the point that valuation was done. So that might be at the time of purchase, you paid US dollars, a certain amount for that item, and you know what the conversion rate was to convert that into Australian dollars. That's been a huge change because valuations appear in many, many places in the system. You've got a whole range of different ways you can report on that data. It appears in all the different activity records, and it appears on many of the different custom screens that we've developed for clients. So all of that's had to be changed to support this feature. Behind the scenes, whenever you change a record, we're keeping a log of those changes in our audit file. And we've made a couple of changes to the audit rollback window. The first of those is to allow you to see the internal data that Vernon's recording as part of that change. So for example, on this particular record, there's a cataloguer recorded, but cataloguer links to the person file, and you might actually have two real people with exactly the same names. So there's now a new view in the audit window that'll let you see the internal data, including the IDs that it's linking to on the related files. And that would let you clearly see which actual person record is being linked to from this object record that has been changed. We've also added a technical tab which shows all of the different software programs that Vernon was running at the point that this change was made. And that can be useful for us to troubleshoot security restrictions that have been set up in your system or any bugs in the system. We can see exactly what was going on when those changes were made. We're also having to add increasing security layers on all our different websites, and we're making use of Amazon's product the web application firewall to do that. So that's a product that we now use as a layer in front of our company websites, things like our vernonsystems.com website, plus all of our Vernon browser public online collection sites and our separate product eHive. So the web application firewall lets us set up automated rules like blocking people that are from a certain malicious computer trying to access the website, as well as doing more complex, nuanced checks. So maybe a particular country might be hosting lots of malicious traffic, but not necessarily all of those visitors are ones we want to block. So we might instead present an I am not a robot type check, just as an additional safeguard to block any of those bulk processes that we don't want continuously accessing the website. And so as well as enabling us to set up a whole lot of different rules for how those websites are accessed, it gives us a new way of visualizing the access as it's happening in real time. So here's some stats for our Vernon browser websites where we're showing access by country. And this was during a week where we had a number of different malicious AI bots trawling our Vernon browser sites and effectively swamping those sites with traffic. And so we can see in the breakdown of countries that in that particular week, China far outstripped all of the different other countries that were accessing the site. And we were able to then proactively add a rule to check each of those visitors and just check that they were real people rather than just automated processes. We continue to gain new clients. So since the in-person user group meetings a couple of months ago, we've gained 2 more clients. We've got Cairns Art Gallery in Australia, and we've also got the Charles Upham Trust, a military collection in the South Island. As the data in Vernon CMS gets more complex, more rich, we need to provide more ways to reformat that information. So Vernon CMS is the source of truth, detailing all of the things in your collection and the things that happen to those collection items in their lifetime. And so through things like our calculated fields or user symbolics, we can take that information and we can change how it's presented when we share that information out of the system. And I just wanted to show you some typical examples of what we do. In the first example, on an object record, you might link to multiple different artists in the separate related person file. Here we've taken 2 different links to person records in the artist field. We've pulled in information about nationality and life years from that related record, and then we've automatically appended the role that each of those people played in creating this specific object record. And that can be then the way we present this information in our online collection website. In the second example, we're actually generating new content. We're automatically generating a credit line in this case for the Museum of Transport and Technology in Auckland. So we're taking a standard piece of text, the name of the organisation, and then automatically adding in front of it the title information and the accession number. And because that's a calculated field, it's always correct and always updated live. So if somebody fixes a mistake in the title, that credit line on the website is automatically updated and is in sync with the rest of the information. We can also choose to pull out very specific subsets of information. Here's a record on the Cenotaph database, which Auckland Museum uses to share military service records of people they've recorded in Vernon's person file. The service number of each of those soldiers is recorded in the names table of the person record, but they wanted to present that with its own field label on its own section on the website. And so we're able to use another one of these calculated fields to only pull out names of type service number and present that as if it was its own standalone field. And then lastly, we can just simply style information that's been recorded. Like here's a list that's in the parts table of an object record, and Pukiyariki wanted to style that to show that each of these were subsets of a particular archive, and they wanted a specific icon for each of those individual parts. And so that data formatting then becomes the foundation for how we present that information to a number of different third-party sites. So that includes things like the Atlas of Living Australia in Australia, the Trove website, which is built by the National Library of Australia, Digital NZ, the cultural aggregator in New Zealand, and a number of different digital asset management systems. And so those systems can then access that information with whatever reformatting we've applied, with specific subsets of information presented as if it was a standalone field, because that's what's needed on maybe the partner website. And then that website can do its own styling and presentation for interacting with that content. Here we can see the 900,000 biodiversity specimens that Queensland Museum presents on the Atlas of Living Australia website, including their map interface, where we can drill into any parts of the world and see exactly which specimens were collected from those locations. So here I'm in Auckland, and I can see that this is one specific specimen that was collected from the sea just off the coast of where our office is. Sometimes the sharing of this information relies on a standard way of presenting it and accessing it from different systems. And one of those methods is called the Open Archives Initiative Protocol for Metadata Harvesting. Basically a standardized way of viewing information and reading sets of records and results. We're extending Vernon Browser to support that standard so that we can better work with partners like Trove. And so Vernon Browser is now going to include a new mapping screen in the admin section that says exactly which fields you're wanting to share with partners like Trove and which of their standard fields each of your elements of information would be mapped to. So here we can see that I've mapped the object type field in Vernon to their field, which they call type. We're also continuing to extend the programming interface that connects into Vernon CMS's backend. So here's a sample set of data that I've accessed using that API. So I could go into a demo system and I could do a search for a particular keyword, perhaps all of the vases in our collection, and it's showing me a summary of the different records. You might have a third-party system that wants to be able to do similar queries and actually see the live data that's recorded in the back end in Vernon. And then that third-party system has complete control over how that information is presented. So if I switch to my web browser, I can see that same search presented. So here I've done a search for query equals vase on that same demo database, and I'm seeing that same set of results coming back. So the ID of each individual object record with its one-line summary. The programming interface lets us access all of the different files that you've allowed that API connection to access. So maybe all of the object records and the people records, and then any of the fields in there. So this is just the summary view, but we could access any of the individual cataloging fields to reuse that in some other way in a different application. And so that ability to share information is a key part of Vernon Browser. And that's why we've got sites always looking to either implement Vernon Browser to share their collections with the public or upgrading to newer versions of the browser to make use of these added features. And these are some of the sites that we've worked on just in this calendar year. And we're continuing to add other features. So there's now map support directly in Vernon Browser. And we can see that in use in the Queensland Museum site. We're also embedding content from other partner websites. So for instance, 3D scans of objects is something we support through both the Sketchpad platform and the Pedestal 3D platform, which is an Australian product. So if I click on this related object, I can see that live on the website. So any object which has some other embedded rich content on it will automatically have a button that lets you jump down to that extra content. And so that jumps me into the player that's part of the Pedestal platform. So at this point, all of this code is from their platform, and we're just embedding the player they've developed. The pedestal player is particularly sophisticated because it handles multi-part objects. So this 3D scan, for instance, is a vase that's been broken into several pieces, and I can choose to hide or show individual pieces from that to get a better understanding of how those fragments go together. We're also embedding sound and video content from third-party platforms like SoundCloud, Vimeo, or YouTube. And Hamilton City Libraries is one example that's been making use of that. So again, if I switch to their website and we look at an example, this is an oral history record where they've actually recorded those different oral history entries and they've uploaded them to the Vimeo platform. And so again, there's a link on the record to jump down to that, and we're automatically embedding the Vimeo player. In this case, this record has multiple different links, and I've got those embedded as a series of different individual interviews that make that group of oral history entries. We also continue on making the Vernon browser product as accessible as possible. So that's covering people that have visual impairments or issues with accessing the content due to layout or any other form like color schemes. And so one of the things that we've done recently is adding better options to support screen readers. So if I click on this example object record, one of the new international standards is the ability to press the tab key to jump straight to the body of the content on a page. But that only works if the product has got that built in as a key that it recognizes and it knows where to jump to. And so that's something we've done in Vernon Browser. I can click on the tab key and that brings up a new toolbar to allow somebody to jump straight to the main content. And that'll jump down into the body section. And so that allows things like a screen reader to easily jump past the main menu where it might have many, many different things that a screen reader has to read aloud before they get to the thing they're actually interested in. We've also extended the highlights feature in the browser so that you can temporarily hide an individual set. So that's particularly useful if you have highlight sets which are only maybe valid for a particular period of a year. You might have an Anzac Day highlight set and you only want to enable that every April each year. So rather than deleting the set and having to redo it every year, you can just hide it and then re-show it a year later. There's also the ability to now add an introductory text message when visitors first arrive on the site, and that can also be used to show cultural warnings. In the admin section of the browser, there's a screen where you can edit that and you can style that however you wish. So with bolds, italics, links, and so on. There have been some minor changes in version 12.5.1 for Vernon CMS, and part of that is together with Vernon Browser. So there's now the ability to live publish PDF files from Vernon CMS and have those appearing on the website. And so Queensland Parliament is one of the first sites that's making use of that. And so they're now presenting those as interactive PDF documents where people can then page by page view those documents live online. We've also extended the browser so there's the option to index the text content that appears in those PDF documents. Vernon Browser also has what we call kiosk mode, and we're seeing that getting used in a variety of different sites now. So kiosk mode lets you lock down the browser so that every link that would go out of the website is automatically disabled. So visitors are effectively locked down to that site and can't browse off elsewhere on the internet. And that it also disables features that don't make sense on a shared device, like the sharing with social media buttons that are in Vernon Browser don't make sense on a shared device because you're not going to get each individual visitor logging into their own Facebook account on that device. And so that allows you to repurpose the online website in a physical setting. So on a touch screen in your gallery, you can make use of the whole online collection website to share more information about your collection to your on-site visitors. We also continue to extend the AI facilities within Vernon Browser. So we rely on a product called Google Cloud Vision, and that does things like analyzing the text keywords that appear in an image. So it's looking at an image and trying to understand what are the different subject keywords that it could add for those. And so as Google Cloud Vision improves, we're seeing those keywords gradually evolve. So this is a record which we ran through its analysis a year ago, and then I reran that this week, and we can see those keywords have gradually evolved. So for instance, it's dropped off the word amber, which is slightly ambiguous. It could mean a type of material, or it could mean a color. And then we're seeing some better recognition that this is, for instance, a ceramic or pottery object, which it wasn't able to detect a year ago. So that keyword analysis is continuing to improve all the time. For us, the use of AI, the most important thing is that the control is in the hands of the end users. So with all the AI facilities that we build, it's important that there's always the option to decide whether that's enabled or not. So each of the AI features for color analysis and subject keywords you can disable or enable on your own website. And then we also have fine-grained control as to what kind of content it decides to present to the public users. So for instance, with those subject keywords, Google Cloud Vision comes back with a percentage for each individual keyword, saying how confident is it that that keyword's correct. Here's a typical example. This is a painting of an albatross, and these are the different keywords that it came back with. In Vernon Browser, we can set a threshold to hide all of the keywords that are below a certain category. So we might decide, well, anything below 80% we're going to discard, and then we would be automatically hiding things like swans, which it thinks maybe is a category for this, but it isn't that confident about. We also continue to extend what we provide in terms of online help. So Penny's been converting the online webinars that we have into explainer articles. So those are text-based articles that talk you through step by step how to use particular features in the system. Penny's also continuing to work on our Vernon Online Advanced course. So this is a new course that we'll be offering next year, and that has a whole lot of extra topics that go beyond the existing basic online training module. And so in the final session, we'll be discussing different features that are under development already, and then getting ideas from all of you through both breakout sessions and a general discussion at the end. So at the moment, we're doing a lot of work on the web side of things to support a standard that's called the International Image Interoperability Framework, or IIIF is what it's most commonly known as, because that's quite a long-winded name otherwise. And so III is where our product name comes to this, where we've called this Triocular. And so it's a new product that's going to be handling high resolution media files. So handling the three different aspects of working with those files. So firstly, the actual storage of that content, so working with those large files, naming them and storing them somewhere in the cloud. Adding descriptive data about those, so that's often connecting to catalog records when it's a system like Vernon CMS, and then lastly providing ways of viewing those images. So large image files, just because of their size, are often difficult to work with, so providing tools where people can zoom in and out and pan in a way that still works well over the web. And so that's an independent product, but it'll be incorporated directly into Vernon Browser and eHive. So you'll be able to present high resolution images if you wish on Vernon Browser. But it's also going to be available as a standalone product. So if you've just got high resolution images and need a way to store and manage that content, then it'll provide a cloud service for doing that. And so it'll handle converting the high resolution source images into standard formats that can then be viewed over the web. It'll support transparent images, which is sometimes the case for things like marketing material. And then we're also looking at e-commerce options where you might be able to provide options for end users to download a very high original, but perhaps at a cost. You might have a nominal charge before people are allowed to access high resolution versions. So some of this work's already up and running in our internal quality assessment version of Vernon Browser. So I'm just going to open that up so that we can see the live version of that. And so I'll go to one of the places where we work with uploading images. So if I was creating a highlight set in Vernon Browser, so that's the ability of manually grouping together a list of works and then sharing that as a set to the general public. So maybe I'm making a new natural history set, which is maybe minerals of the world. We've built a new media file manager. So any files that you've uploaded through this high resolution image service, we've now got a new page where you can see all of those files you've uploaded and search within them and pick them in different parts of the interface. And then there's also the option of uploading a new file. So if I had a high resolution image that I wanted to upload, so I've got an example one for this user group meeting. I can upload that, and then our triocular service is then doing some of those steps I talked about. It's converting that high resolution TIFF file into a format that would work on the web. And I can create, I'll have to give that list name. And so now that image is there and I can make use of it in the past that the public see. And I can also see it when I'm browsing the images directly in the admin interface. So that's now an image that exists in the cloud where we're hosting that high resolution image and making it available for access to the admin interface. So now I've got that super high resolution image of one type of minerals in our collection. And so this is using that international standard, which provides tools for viewing those in different ways. Another version of media might be a PDF with multiple pages. And so this same standard supports multi-page documents with things like options of comparing pages side by side or flipping between pages. So it'll open up the options we've got for different media types and for presenting that very high resolution content. We also continue to work on the AI features that we support. So we already support text recognition in PDF files where it's actually recorded as text. So things like this document on the right side is a text document with some images, and we can automatically detect that text and make it searchable. The product that we use, Google Cloud Vision, does support text recognition in images. So trying to understand words that are appearing on an image, like the one on the left is a product, a bar of soap that's in our social history collection. And so with AI, we could automatically detect that text and also make that searchable. So that's something that's easy for us to add on. There's just a charge from Google's side for that work for them to process the image. That's something that we'd have to pass on, but the cost isn't high. It's $150 per 100,000 images is their current charges for doing that text analysis. We're also upgrading the underlying database platform that Vernon's based on. So we're moving forward to Open Insight version 10, and that'll give us options to improve the user interface and some performance improvements. So that includes things like changing the styling of different pages like the login page and introducing new features that aren't currently possible, like the ability to on the fly increase the row height of a table you're working on. So this is something we've already got working in the development version of the next Open Insight version 10 version of Vernon. So moving that row height up and down because perhaps you're working with a piece of text where you need a bit more space. And then as part of some of the general changes in that upgrade, there's other things that we're looking at. So having different saved views of list manager, so you could easily swap to a conservation-oriented view or a registrars-oriented view of a set of object search results. improving the ways that we present duplicate or possible duplicate person records when you're creating person records, making it easier to work with groups of packing units. So things like the moves that Jennifer was doing, making it easy to pick saved lists of collapsible containers or cylinder boxes so that you can move those in bulk. And then also extending the restriction table on the catalogue record so that you've got starts and end dates. So there might be a particular restriction that applies to an object, but only for a specific period. We're also enhancing the features that we have for managing deaccessions of objects. So this is a screenshot as those fields currently exist in the system, and it's primarily dealing with recording the deaccession once it's completed. You've got a status field to say that a particular process is in progress, but once it's deaccessioned, you would just fill in the details to say, well, this is what happened. We've had a number of different online discussion groups to help us improve what different fields are available for this facility. And so then the final design that we've come up with splits out the authorization steps, so the management of the process of deciding whether or not a deaccession will happen, and separates that from the actual disposal. And so both of those now are in repeatable tables. All of your existing information will be retained. All of the fields marked in blue are fields that already exist, but they'll all become multi-entry ones. So you could actually handle more complex cases, such as an object where there's several different physical parts and only some of those are deaccessioned, or ones where there's maybe several people involved in the process, and so you need several different authorizing people, or maybe different parts of the object went to different people and you need multiple disposal rows to record all of that. So that'll greatly extend the complexity of information that you can manage for deaccessions. So that gives you a recap of the key things that we've been working on over the last 6 to 12 months.